In this story, I'm going to tell you how a 34-year-old boat restorer in Portsmouth watched a thief try to empty her business account and then trapped him using nothing but a homemade digital sting. But she didn't call the cops or hire a hacker. She sent a fake recovery, logged the connection, cut his access mid-theft, and reclaimed her accounts. Stay with me, I'll show you the exact trap she set, the single login that gave him away, and the unexpected package that closed the loop. My name is Evelyn Maris Caldwell. I am 34, I live in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and I work at a small maritime restoration shop near the harbor where the smell of salt and old paint clings to my clothes. I have always been the kind of woman who fixes things with her hands and reads legal thrillers in the quiet hours, who knows how to steady a twitching engine mount and how to keep her temper when customers yell about delays. People who meet me once call me practical, loyal, and stubborn. I grew up 2 towns over, daughter of a shipwright who could coax life back into a rotting keel, and a mother who ran a diner and taught me the economy of a good stew and clear speech. I learned early that repair is a verb and that promises are made to be kept. Life runs like the clock on the town hall for a while. Mornings spent at the shop, evenings with a cheap cup of coffee, and the hum of my laptop as I check bills and emails, weekends out on the water when the weather allows. My business is small but honest. We refinish decks, restore cabin wood, rebuild antique compasses, and sometimes take on the odd hull from someone nostalgic for better summers. The town knows me. I know the faces at the marina and the rhythm of tides and customers. I like the predictability of that world. It lets me sleep despite the creak of the harbor in the night. Then one Tuesday, a message arrives that shifts everything. I get a call from someone who claims to be from a national shipping company I sometimes work with. He says there was a billing error, that a refund is headed to my bank, and that to confirm the account we need to verify my password and phone number. The voice is slick, calm, and oddly familiar with the details of shipments I had actually handled. He mentions the last manifest number, the rust spot on a crate we'd repacked last month, the name of a subcontractor I only use in emergencies. That little familiarity is the hook, the same way a fake rivet that fits the hole makes you trust a repair. I give the information because the voice seems legitimate, because the timing makes sense, because I have employees who depend on payroll and a landlord who will not wait for a mistake. Within an hour, my business bank account shows a withdrawal attempt for $9,000. I go cold when I realize they are trying to empty the account I used to pay rent, payroll, and the shop loan. My hands shake as I try to call the bank, as I track emails and devices on my accounts. The shop, usually a sanctuary of predictable smells and measured noise, becomes a theater of panic. Radios blare a local baseball game while I tap keys like a frantic conductor. I discover a nightmarish pattern. My Gmail has been logged into from a device in another country, my phone is showing strange notifications, and a new payment method is attached to my online vendor account. The person who did this is my nemesis now. Anonymous, efficient, and dangerous in a way that hits my life where it counts. I am furious, scared, and utterly determined not to be a passive victim. I picture the slow work of taking back what is mine the way I picture sanding a warped plank, tedious, precise, and unforgiving if you miss a single knot. That night I do not sleep. I sit at the bench under the single hanging lamp and make lists. I think about the people I know who have the patience to haunt online forums for hours, the ones who can coax information from a string of logs the way I coax varnish into grain. I also remember my mother's voice: don't let fear move you quick, let anger move you steady. The shipwright in my head tells me that a good repair starts with inspection. So I open every door I can. I call numbers, pull IP histories, screenshot unknown devices. The work is small, unglamorous detective stuff, and it makes my hands less restless. But every discovery feels like a new hole in the hull, another way they could sink what I built. By midnight, I have a list of corrupted recovery emails, a vendor account I cannot access, and an ugly new phone number tied to my merchant services. I realize bitterly that this is not random. Whoever did this understood the gaps where a small business sails thin. They knew my payroll schedule, they knew the rhythm of my life. That knowledge makes me angrier than the loss, it makes me dangerously focused. I decide then, with that small stubbornness that I have always relied on, that I will not let an invisible person strip the town of another small, honest business. I file an online fraud report and call the bank again, bracing myself for forms and patience. Every step feels like rowing into a storm, but the muscle memory of fixing things steadies me. The first chapter of what will be a much longer fight closes on that bench light, with my fingers raw from typing and my chest coiled with the kind of resolve that has kept boats afloat in my family for generations. At first, I try the practical things that have always worked for me. I go to the bank and close the account. I sweep through the shop computer, unhook devices, change the router password, and install new malware protection the way I patch a leaky hull. I call the vendor support lines and argue until my voice hurts. I reset passwords, file reports, and put fraud alerts on every account I touch. For a few days, I sleep in 50-minute increments, always ready to answer another alarm. For a short while, it works. The big withdrawal is blocked, the vendor account is frozen, my mother offers to come help and brings casseroles, and that steady calm that reminds me not to spiral. I think I have beaten it. Then things get worse. The thief gets into my email recovery settings and deletes the two-factor authentication app I use. My phone begins to act strange, messages disappear, and the phone battery runs down in half a day. An account I use to collect payments for the shop has a new linked phone number that I cannot control. Between one sharp wave and the next, the cost to me becomes larger. Missed payroll, angry suppliers, and a landlord who wants his rent. The thief seems to anticipate my moves like someone who has watched how I work. It is the kind of careful cruelty that studies the seams of a system until it knows how to pry them open. I start to stack little rituals to feel less helpless. I empty my pockets each night on the same hook by the back door, check the padlocks twice, and write a list of every compromised login on the yellow legal pad that lives on my bench. I go through old notebooks to remind myself of past fixes. The time I coaxed a stuck bilge pump back to life with a bent screwdriver and a prayer. The afternoon I rebuilt a corroded throttle linkage with nothing more than epoxy and persistence. The memories are a map back to competence, but competence in the physical world doesn't translate cleanly to ones and zeros. One night, exhausted and wired, I wake to the ping of a confirmation text I did not request. My chest tightens as I follow the breadcrumb trail on my laptop. An order placed, a delivery address in a city I have never heard of, an invoice tied to my merchant account. I feel the shop ledger slip toward the red, and with it, the small scaffolding of my life. I sit on the edge of my bed and feel everything I built teeter. My hands hover over the keys, and I imagine the thief, not a masked figure with a crowbar, but the invisible, surgical mind who can turn my tools against me. I have never felt so naked and exposed as when my own devices turn against me, and the thing I love, my work, is at risk of vanishing. I try to imagine how they did it. I replay every phone call and email, remembering small phrases the caller used, the way they knew a shipment number from a job 6 months old. I think of pattern and habit, of how easy it is to be steady for years, and how one misstep can unravel it. The town knows me as the woman who fixes things, but no one sees how it feels to watch the wiring of your life be pulled loose by a faceless hand. I file more police reports, speak to IT support until my voice is gravel, and listen to friends offer words that mean well but don't buy bolts or fuel. Each bureaucratic promise feels like a bucket with a hole in it, necessary, but not enough. The worst night arrives when the thief uses my vendor account to place a bulk order of materials bound for that foreign address. I call the vendor support again, pleading and precise, while my stomach twists. My mother stays on the line in the next room, her voice steady like ballast. It feels in that hour like trying to hold a leaking boat afloat with my bare hands. I want to scream, to tell the world that this is theft, not a crime without consequence. I sit very still as the weight of possible failure settles over me. For the first time in a long while, I taste real fear. Not the sharp, useful fear that makes you move quickly, but the slow, sour fear that settles in your throat and makes you consider giving up. And yet I do not give up. Even as the shop ledger reddens and my nights shrink to breathless fits of sleep, something stubborn inside me refuses to let this be the end. The thief is clever, but they left traces. Timestamps, a wrong time zone, an odd header in an email that smells faintly of another language. They have a method. Methods can be studied, and studied things can be undone. I pin that thought to the corkboard above my bench like a map, because maps are what I know how to follow when the sea gets rough. Decide I will not be helpless. The first time fear tightened its grip, I had been 12 and watched my father patch a hole below the waterline with nothing more than a length of oak and stubbornness. The lesson stuck: you do not wait for rescue, you make one. Years earlier, when a supplier handed me a dead GPS logger and an apology, I taught myself basic network tools to coax the data back. Those nights with soldering iron and terminal window were not just quirks of curiosity, they were practice. I pull those skills out now like a chisel. I buy a second phone with cash, set up a secure email on a computer that has never left the shop, and begin to trace the digital breadcrumbs the thief left. It feels like sanding old varnish, tedious, exacting, and oddly intimate. I map recorded login times against suspected time zones, read device fingerprints like grain and timber, and spot the tiny mistakes every scammer makes. a mismatched time zone, an email header with an unexpected language tag, a recovery number echoing patterns I've seen in other scam traces. Each clue is a splinter I pick out. I assemble a plan the way I would plan a restoration. First, isolate and secure, next, recover critical accounts, finally, expose and sever the thief's access. At the center is a risky move I tell no one. I create a request that looks like a routine password recovery on the vendor platform the thief already controls. Using the recovered secure email, I send the request and set a trap. Because the thief used their phone for verification, I stage a login from a virtual device that appears local to the city their activity suggests. When they attempt to confirm the login, their phone receives an automated configuration file I designed to do one thing: force a fresh verification step and prompt an urgent looking system update. The update instructions lead them to a web page where I can log the connection and capture the originating address. It is a long shot, like testing an unfamiliar epoxy. I need to hold a joint under stress, and my chest tightens as I wait. Then it happens, a connection. The log shows an IP tracing back to a cyber cafe in a coastal city far from New Hampshire, and a username that matches fragments I'd seen in header metadata. I take careful screenshots, like photographing progress on a complicated restoration. I push through account recoveries with the vendor and my bank using the new secure email and the temporary phone. It is messy and nerve-wracking. Phone menus, hold music, the polite disbelief of support reps, but methodical. The thief realizes they've been found and makes a last frantic move to sell off merchant credits. I call vendor support in the same minute and prove I am the rightful owner with the new credentials. They freeze the transfers. The culmination is not cinematic, no villain chained in a dark room, but a quiet, legal, technical victory. The bank reverses the withdrawal, the vendor closes the malicious number, and I reclaim accounts one by one. There is a small, private flourish the day I remotely sign out every unknown device from my Gmail and send a factory reset command to the virtual device the thief used as a verification proxy. I picture him clutching his own saved phone, eyes narrowing as access dies. That imagined look of anger and bewilderment settles something inside me. For the first time since this began, I breathe easier. After the storm, things settle into a new normal. The shop bears a few scars from the weeks of chaos: scratched paint on the counter, a warped box of invoices, the router tucked in a different corner. But it survived. I sit on a folding chair behind my workbench and allow myself the small luxury of a long, hot cup of coffee that I do not have to gulp between troubleshooting calls. The rhythm of Sanders and the scent of linseed oil come back like a tide. I rewired my accounts, signed up for more robust security services, and I taught my employees how to spot social engineering so none of us fall into that trap again. I put up a laminated checklist by the register: verify caller ID, never give passwords over the phone, take 5 before clicking. They joked about it at first. By the end of the week, they were reciting it like a safety drill. It felt good to change habits into armor. There are practical victories and quieter ones. I took a small, private pleasure in sending a carefully worded message to the thief's last known contact points. Not bluster or threats, but an unambiguous statement that their access had been revoked, that the accounts were secured, and that the evidence had been passed to the competent authorities. I phrased it like a ship's log: cold, precise, and factual, so anyone reading would understand there was no appetite for games. I never expected glory. The payoff was steadier and quieter. My rent is paid, my suppliers answer my calls without suspicion now, and the ledger is moving toward black again. My muscles ache from worry and from work both. There's a different kind of tired that comes from rebuilding things you love. The experience left me with something else, a new confidence carved from necessity. I learned that I could teach myself dangerous small things: how to read headers, how to craft a lure, how to lock a door remotely and use them well. I also learned the cost. Vigilance becomes a muscle. You keep checking the locks long after the locks have been changed. You log out of accounts when you should be relaxing. You look at a stranger's smooth, practiced voice and hear potential deception. It's a trade-off that buys safety at the price of a low hum of suspicion under everything. There is one last twist that I keep to myself and a few friends. A week after everything wraps, I come home from a morning of measuring keel angles and teaching an apprentice how to fillet a joint. There's a small, unmarked package on my porch with no return address. No plastic bubble bravado, just a brown envelope with the corners softened by handling. Inside is an old, scratched phone and a single strip of paper folded like a blade. I feel a flicker: vindication, curiosity, and something sharper that I do not name. The note is typed, not handwritten, in a font that looks like it was spit out by an office in a building with frosted windows. It reads without flourish. Device recovered, proof attached. Attached to the phone is a crudely printed screenshot, a log entry, a timestamp, and a location marker that matches the city I had traced in my trap. It isn't a confession. It isn't fanfare. It is breadcrumb evidence, a small, deliberate thing meant to be seen and then ignored by the world. I hold the phone and feel the grain of the plastic under my thumb as if it were a piece of salvaged timber. I could turn it over to the police, add another folder to the case file, but the police already have what they need to follow official channels. Instead, I tuck the phone into a drawer in my desk, a reminder and a talisman. It is not a trophy to show off, it's a lesson that sometimes closure arrives folded into something plain and unassuming. For days after, I find myself looking at the little victory the way I used to look at a well repaired hull. Small errors sanded away, joints sealed, function restored. The shop sings again with colleagues, laughter, and the steady drone of tools. I sleep deeper. When the fog rolls off the Piscataqua River in the mornings, I walk down to the harbor and feel the salt on my face like a benediction. I am still Evelyn Maris Caldwell, the woman who can steady an engine mount and reroute a digital tide. And I like that the story ends not in spectacle, but in the return of ordinary things. It is nonsense, probably typed by someone used to sending messages that hide names. I toss the phone into my desk drawer rather than into the trash. It is not a trophy. It is a reminder. I am still Evelyn Maris Caldwell, the woman who fixes wooden hulls and digital leaks, who will not be hollowed out by some anonymous person. I sleep better now, and when the fog rolls off the Piscataqua River in the mornings, I walk down to the harbor and feel the salt on my face like a small benediction. Still, some habits die hard. The phone stays in the drawer like a splinter beneath a fingernail, a small, persistent pain you notice when you use the other hand. I take it out sometimes in the evenings, roll it over in my palm, and read the faded note tucked under the cracked screen, a single line in cramped black ink. You almost made it. It is not a threat so much as a punctuation mark, a someone reminding me that none of this is finished. I run my thumb along the edge where the case is gouged and imagine the hands that handled it, calloused, hurried, indifferent. That imagination is fuel, not fear. At the shop, I add another lock to the supply cabinet and pin a laminated checklist by the register. Secure logins, physical inventory, two-person sign-off for shipping changes. I teach Maria how to inspect phones for hidden SIM trays and how to spot a hurried teardown that hides a proxy device. The crew grumbles at first. They are craftsmen and prefer planes to passwords. But the ledger is staying green, and the suppliers answer my calls without that old edge of suspicion. I take my coffee across from the harbor instead of staring at the glowing repair bench. The gulls keep their business simple, and there is comfort in that. Sometimes I replay the moments that got me here, not to obsess but to learn. I remember the slick voice on the phone and the tiny confidence it borrowed from my own competence. I remember how helplessness feels, a cold, hollow thing, and how the work to fill it is just as much about small, practical steps as it is about pride. I do not tell anyone the part I liked. The quiet satisfaction of luring someone out with their own habits, of making a mistake look routine until it led them to show their hand. It was not righteous, it was necessary. I think of the cafe where the log traced to and the errant language setting that gave away a name fragment. Those small details feel like carved dovetails, unseen once finished, but what makes the whole structure hold? Once a week, I drive the coastline, windows down, letting the cold air map the ridges of my face. I stop at a marina I do not intend to use just to watch other people tie up their boats, to see how they check lines and fenders. There is a human rhythm to it that steadies me, hands that know the grain of rope, eyes that judge a hull's list with a glance. I have always believed work anchors the self. After the theft, that belief is a tether I choose deliberately. When night comes, I let myself think of ordinary things, the exact way varnish smells when it is warmed by the sun, the weight of a proper wrench, and the drawer with the phone becomes less like evidence and more like a bookmarked place in a story I have not finished reading. The note in the package was unsigned, but I do not need a name. It was a reminder that hands can be used to break or build, and that there is a strength in learning both languages. I am cautious now, yes, and a little cruel in my wariness, but I am also steadier. If the thief ever decides to show up again, they will find a shop that laughs too loudly and locks its doors twice. They will find a woman who knows her hulls and her headers, who drinks black coffee and reads legal briefs like other people read romances. I keep the scratched phone because it makes me remember. Not the panic, but the process, the gathering of evidence, the slow tightening of a knot until it holds. That is the story I tell myself when the fog is thick and the harbor smells like brine and oil. I survived. I will keep fixing what is broken.